What's up, everyone? It's Thursday, August 2nd, 2018. This is Raphael Garcia back for episode 94. I believe that's what we're on of the MMA Ratings Podcast. As always, I want to say thank you for taking some time to listen to our content. Thank you for checking us out tonight because it's a late night show as we're doing now going forward. But as always, thank you guys for listening to what we have to say either live when we're on or checking us out on YouTube after the fact. As always, feel free to subscribe and share our content and give the thumbs up button a quick click as well to support our content. We thank everybody who's listening to our show and continuing to help push us along. Schwan will be joining in, I believe, at some point. I have not heard from him yet, but he'll probably be joining on at some point, as he usually does. He's probably out, as always, being super dad, as I like to call him, doing something for his daughters. But if he steps in, great. If he doesn't, no problem. I can definitely carry the show for a few minutes at least before I fuck something up and burn all this down. But this week, we will be talking about UFC on Fox 220, or excuse me, UFC 227, which is this weekend, where TJ Dillashaw and Demetrius Johnson are both defending their titles. And I'm also going to be giving a look back to UFC on Fox 30 from last weekend, which was a great card, but not a lot of people watched it, or not enough people watched it. And we're going to be talking about those numbers as well, too. But I was looking through this week's content, and I really didn't see a whole lot of news worth coverage. I'm not talking about the White House trip. Nope, not talking about that. I didn't see a lot of coverage, a lot of big news stories that made me kind of want to jump off the page. I know they're working on the Israel Adesanya Derek Brunson fight, but that has not been officially announced yet. They're looking at that for November. Bellator has been doing a lot of work signing a lot of guys to contracts. They also got a new television deal too as well, so that's something worth going out and doing some research on. But I didn't sit down and do a lot of research on what news is being floated out there from this week. Didn't have the time to, but I'm sure that there's a lot going on. It's interesting because this weekend we have a UFC pay-per-view, a numbered pay-per-view event with two good. I'm looking forward to seeing both matches, both fights on the card, but it's been very quiet. Mum's been the word leading up to this weekend's event, and I was actually talking to some people this week, asking them what do they expect the results to be, and it seems like everybody across the board is saying that this show will come in under uh, 200 pay-per-view buys, 200K in pay-per-view buys, and I'm finding a hard time refuting that, because if you look at what DJ and TJ have both done as individual main events, neither one, I think one of them has headlined an event that has brought in more than 200 buys. I think TJ did one that was 215. TJ has never been a main event other than that opportunity. I think that was when he fought Hidden Brow last minute. But DJ has had three opportunities, and all three of them have been very low on the ratings or pay-per-view buys outcome. So we're now sitting in a situation where there's two champions, both men who are struggling to carry a pay-per-view event on their own, and both of these individuals are in the main and co-main event slots for this weekend. So what does that do for this event? And UFC really hasn't done a whole lot of promotion for this. I haven't seen a lot. I usually see sponsored posts on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter in reference to their upcoming fights. I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen any YouTube ads that have been playing. I haven't seen anything really. So we should really go into this weekend's event thinking that it's not going to bring in 200 200K in pay-per-view buys. That's an unfortunate way to look at it, but I just don't think it's going to be that great of a showcase for either of these four men who are in the two title fights. But even still, that does not mean that we're not going to be in for some great action. I'm interested in seeing what the outcome from both of these fights are, because we have two rematches on our hands. For the main event, it's Dillashaw and Garbrandt fighting for the bantamweight title, and this is a rematch from UFC 217, where Dillashaw got the win in the second round of that fight, stopping Garbrandt via TKO, giving him his first professional loss. And this fight is intriguing to me from a stylistic standpoint. The storyline, TJ left Team Alpha Male. Okay, that storyline is what it is. It's kind of old news now at this point in time. To me, this is a fight that's more about the two best bantamweight athletes in the world fighting in the octagon, and I'm wondering what this fight is going to look like. Is it going to look more like the first round from their bout, or the second round? We remember the first round where Cody landed a stiff overhand shot, the same shot that dropped TJ in that training video, the same exact punch. He landed that shot, dropped TJ at the end of round one. Everybody was up and screaming and cheering about that, just to get dropped and finished in the second round. He took a nasty head kick and then got finished off 2 strikes. So it was definitely some interesting action there, because now we have 5 more scheduled rounds of this, and I'm really intrigued to see their footwork, because both men have great footwork in the cage. I like TJ's ability to land diverse combos. I think that that's something that he uses very well. It's actually how he set up that head kick that started the finish of Garbrandt in round 2 in their first fight, because if you remember, he was ending all of his combinations with a leg kick or throwing in some type of leg strike at the end of his combinations in the first fight, which opened up his ability to fake low and come high with that head kick that rattled Garbrandt. You've seen a lot of pictures of that, of him stiffening up Garbrandt with that head kick. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting for me to watch and see how TJ uses his combinations and what he lands and what angles he cuts to. Because yes, people talk about how his movement is very similar to Dominic Cruz, and it is, but it isn't. And people just aesthetically, it may look similar and awkward, but it's not. It's really not the same. And we've seen Garbrandt take Dominic Cruz's footwork and kind of break that down, and in a way that no one else was able to. Even TJ struggled to do. So it'd be interesting to see if TJ's footwork plays a big part in this fight here, because he uses it in so many different ways. Obviously, he uses it for strikes as well, but we've also seen him use it to mix in wrestling and score takedowns when needed. So it'll be intriguing to see how that comes into play. But with Garbrandt, man, you always got to talk about his power. Dude has the ability to rattle people. We've seen it time and time again. He dropped, as I mentioned, he dropped TJ in their first fight, and had him hurt badly. Because if you remember, when TJ got up, I mean, he looked like he wanted to fall over. So we all know what that was like. And we've seen him mess guys up for an extended period of time. So it'll be interesting to see what his power looks like, especially after the surgery, because of his back issues that he's been suffering from for such an extended period of time. So with all those things kind of taken into account, I'm not going to say that this is a totally different fight, but it's a more intriguing one. It's something that I would definitely want to see from start to finish. I'm leaning more towards Dillashaw in this fight. I think he is an undervalued champion within the UFC. And what I mean by that is, if we remember when Cody won he was put into a position to be like a big time draw. The way the UFC was talking about him made it seem like they felt like they found a guy who could help elevate the lighter weights to another level of recognition and appreciation from the fan base. I'm not certain if that was correct, especially after we see all these issues with Garbrandt's past tweets, and I will be talking about that, whether if people don't want to hear about it or not. I'll be talking about that in a second. But now we see that TJ has an opportunity here to put some space between him and Garbrandt in a way where it's like, hey, I've beat you twice. As long as I have the title, you don't have any space to be in title contention. So it'll be interesting to see if TJ comes out of this, what his stature is as a UFC champion, because I think he's really undervalued there. He doesn't have the strongest resume when you look at his wins and losses. Actually, somebody was talking about today how his title defenses came against Renan Barão and Joe Soto, both of which I think were due to Dominic Cruz being injured or late replacements, one being Dominic Cruz, the other being Renan Barão when he couldn't make weight. So he doesn't have the greatest standing when it comes to being a champion and his title defenses, but I think that that's something that can change. And bantamweight is a division that's not very deep. If TJ wins, you got to look at who's next. Is it Dominic Cruz? I think he gets the nod, or is it Raphael Assunção? Dillashaw has made it clear that he plans on challenging Demetrius Johnson for his flyweight title if he wins, and we'll be talking about that as well, because I think that that's the next logical step for the UFC if both men win. And with that in mind, I'm going to kind of take that and segue into the co-main event, because we have Mighty Mouse defending his title for a second time against Henry Cejudo, and that is a rematch from I think 2016, where Cejudo came into that fight. I'm not gonna say overhyped. I think he was rushed into that fight. He was still relatively new within the UFC. He was still kind of putting things together with his wrestling, and he stepped in there with the guy who, we recognize now as the pound for pound great, pound for pound best in the world, and he was dismantled. We saw that he did take DJ down early in the fight, but DJ got right back up. He actually scored a takedown of his own, and he eviscerated Cejudo with those knees to the body from the clinch. So we saw a guy who was a much better fighter win a fight, as opposed to a struggling to deal with a wrestler who was a better grappler. Fast forward 2 years later, and you got to say, well, how is this fight really different? I think I'm interested in seeing how Henry has improved, because he's looked a lot better, especially a lot better on the feet in his last few bouts. He's shown a willingness to lean on his striking, and his wrestling is just something that's kind of like in his back pocket. And we're talking about an Olympic champion who has a wealth of wrestling experience, putting that in his back pocket and say, hey, I'll use that if I need to, because right now I am growing and developing enough as a striker to put fear in people's hearts. Will that put fear in DJ's hearts? We're going to see. I'm interested in seeing what the speed advantage looked like, because DJ looked a lot faster in their first fight. He's widely considered to be one of the fastest men in the octagon. So I'm wondering what that's going to look like. Is Cejudo going to be able to deal with DJ's movement and his ability to cut so quickly and change angles? What will it look like in the clinch? We clearly saw in the first fight that was Johnson's space there. He was able to control the clinch and do what he wanted to do to Henry. That's an area where DJ consistently outworks his opponents, and I love how he strikes on exit. Every time he's exiting out the clinch, he's striking in some sort of effective manner. It's not just a strike just for strike's business. He's very good at cutting out at an angle off of the clinch and throwing some type of elbow. That's something that he does very well. So I'm interested in seeing how that game comes into play, because he knows that he can control Henry Cejudo in the clinch. He's proven that already once. So I think that that is something that is worth watching as well. And then, he's looking to defend his title for a 12th time. I mean, he's already broken the record. So he's looking to extend that. I mean, this guy could effectively clean out the flyweight division 2 times at this point in time. If you've been watching the interviews that have been going on this week leading into UFC 227, he's been talking about things as if he's kind of bored. I mean, he is even. I don't know if you guys follow wrestling, but there's a professional wrestler named Austin Aries who his gimmick is known as the belt collector, where he travels to various promotions collecting belts, basically defeating champions in various promotions and taking their title from them. Um, the DJ is talking like, hey, he's about willing to come in and do the same thing. So let's see what that looks like, because I mean, of course, he's not going to be able to do it. Of course, he's not going to be able to do it, but the man is the greatest fighter, pound for pound, in the world right now. I thoroughly believe that. So what's next for him? Do you put him in there with Sergio Pettis if he wins? Do you put him in there? Do you bring back Kyoji Horiguchi, who's tearing up the Japanese MMA scene right now, looking fantastic out there? Do you bring him back and give him another title shot? I mean, hell, I kind of want to see that fight more than I want to see this weekend's rematch, just because I think Horiguchi is such an interesting fighter. But that's neither here nor there, because I don't believe that that's ever going to happen. And also today, Johnson was talking about moving up to bantamweight to challenge for that title as well. So being more open to a fight against the winner of Dillashaw versus Garbrandt, not depending upon who comes out on top, but being more interested in that fight there. In my opinion, that fight needs to come down to a Jerry Maguire type situation where he's screaming out, "Show me the money." The reason being because DJ is the longest reigning champion, and he's one of the more active champions as well. He's not someone who rests on his laurels. He's out there defending the title against whoever's around for him to defend the title against. So if it's almost as it's frustrating, because it's clear like the UFC does not want him. UFC does not want him as a champion. Every time I see a UFC post about DJ, I always kind of like to look through the comments, because the fan reaction to seeing his face it's disturbing and hilarious to me at the same time. People call him all types of names. They claim he's ducking TJ. He's running from challenger to challenger, trying to do nothing else but defend his title. I mean, hell, he's defended that belt 11 times now. And he won it in 2012, 6 years ago. We may never see another run like this in mixed martial arts. But Schwan, how you doing, sir? Are you there?
Yeah, not bad, man. How you doing?
Can't hear you, my man.
Hold on a second.
All right, Schwan, I am going to eject you. Boom.
Hello?
Boom, because I could not hear you. See something, folks. But we're looking at a guy as a champion who very well may be the best fighter of all time, and fight fans just do not appreciate having him. It's almost kind of sad. Okay, hold on 1 second. Give me a second, because Schwan is going to join us here. All right. So anyway, I'm interested in seeing what happens if DJ comes out as champion, and if we do finally get some sort of super fight between he and whoever is the bantamweight champion in the future. Schwan, you there?
Hello?
Nope, still can't hear anything, sir.
Hello?
Schwan,
Can you hear me now? Hello?
so while he works on that, so I definitely think that this is probably one of the more intriguing. And let's take a step back because sorry about that, folks. But if you've been watching Cejudo and his development and training camp leading into this weekend's fight, he's talking about things differently. He's been in there working. He's been in there training hard, and it just seems like he is getting exponentially better, which I think is important in mixed martial arts. Henry is not young in any shape or form. He's not, but he's still young, or he's young comparatively speaking to the MMA game, which is key because there's always going to be there's that room for growth that I don't think we always kind of that I don't think a lot of fighters really take advantage of. We see him developing his game in a way as if I don't, and it's interesting. I just thought about something. I hope he's not necessarily training to specifically defeat Demetrius, but training to improve. Period. Because I think that's going to be the bigger bastion of improvement for his career and anyone's career at that point in time. Not training to necessarily beat a specific guy, but training to get better across the board. Schwan, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Nope, can't hear anything, man.
Hello?
So I'm not sure what's going on with Schwan today, but his sound seems to be a little bit off. I'm gonna let him work on that while we just kind of continue going on with the show here. So we have two fights, two title fights at the top of UFC 227. But in reality, I took some time today to look at the rest of the card, and I'm like, what really stands out to me? Because nothing is, and I hate to say it like that, and I hate to kind of disrespect the rest of the guys on this card, but nothing
Hello?
else jumps out at all. You have Cejudo and Johnson in the co-main event, Dillashaw and Garbrandt at the top. Then you have Cub Swanson and Renato Carneiro in the in a flyweight bout, which is important. That's a big fight there. Renato's been
Hello?
looking good. He dropped a fight to Brian Ortega, which is his only professional loss. But other than that, he's been doing very well in UFC with wins over Calvin Kattar and Jeremy Stevens, which I think both of those are very important. But he's facing off against Cub Swanson, who's coming off the loss to Frankie Edgar, and Cub is always a tough out at any point in time. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like in this fight on Saturday, and to see what's next for these two guys. Let me see where they're ranked right now. Schwan, can you hear me? Are you there?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Still can't hear you, dude. So anyway, let's see where these two guys are ranked. I'm curious. Featherweight is in an interesting place, especially if Max Holloway is out longer than is expected. So Cub is ranked at 5, and wow, Carneiro's not ranked at all. Oh wait, is that him at number 10? That might be him at number 10 if they're going by his nickname. Yeah, they're going by his nickname. So he's ranked at number 10 there. So let's see what this 29-year-old guy competitor looks like. He's facing a veteran in Swanson, a guy who's seen just about everything. But as we've seen lately, it's a lot of old guard, slowly but surely cutting down or it's a lot of the young guard cutting down the old guard bit by bit. Swanson's 34 years old, coming up on 35 this year, coming off of two straight losses, one to Edgar and one to Ortega. But he won four straight before that. And he was doing so in pretty dominating fashion. And he had that great fight against Doho Choi from a few years ago. So we're gonna see what this really kind of looks like, and who remains a viable featherweight contender at this point in time, because that division there is kind of wide open. If Holloway remains out longer than expected, you have to put Ortega in a fight to become the next champion. So they have to put Ortega in the fight to be the next champion. But at the same time, it's like, who do you put him in there with? Do they put him in there with Frankie? Well, he just beat Frankie. Do you put him in there with Jeremy Stevens? He just lost to Jose Aldo, who Max Holloway has beaten twice. Do you put him? You can't put him there with Moicano. He's already beaten him. He's already beaten Cub Swanson. So this division is kind of like shaking itself out in a very odd way, and we'll see what happens in the future, because a lot of it is dependent upon Holloway's health and what he can and can't do, and on what timetable. But other than that, there's not much that stands out to me from UFC 227 this weekend. I'm looking forward to the main and co-main events, but beyond that, we'll have to kind of see what happens. So next, I want to talk about UFC on Fox 30. I want to take a look back to Saturday's event where Dustin Poirier defeated Eddie Alvarez via TKO. Was it TKO in the second? Let me see when it was. Yeah, TKO in the second. And this card had everything. We're going to talk about why that matters in a moment, but let's start from the top and go through with Poirier and Eddie Alvarez and what this fight meant, because it meant so much for both men. First, you have Poirier. This is probably his biggest win in his career. He's 24-5, I think 29 years old, and I feel like people forget that. When I look at Poirier, I understand why a lot of people doubted him per se, and they wondered what this young fighter would become. I remember the commentary. Even I was kind of skeptical of him after he lost to Chan Sung Jung back in 2012, where he was submitted there. But I mean, this isn't the same guy who struggled against Cub Swanson in 2013. This isn't the same guy who fought Conor McGregor at UFC 170. I can't remember if he took that fight on short notice or not. This isn't the same guy that was knocked out by Conor in the first round of that fight. I mean, it's just not. Moving up to lightweight has done a lot for his career, and not just what eliminating the weight cut has done for him, but we've seen Poirier grow as a fighter from a IQ standpoint as well. If you go back to last week's show, Schwan and I were talking about the way Dustin tends to throw shit out the window when the fight gets exciting, when the fight gets fast-paced, and he just goes in there and just kind of goes balls to the wall, which creates an opportunity for his opponent to gain ground on him. If you go back to the first fight that he had with Eddie, what was that, in 2016? The one that ended in 2017, excuse me, the one that ended in a no contest. He had Eddie hurt early But what he did was he got more and more reckless. He got overly aggressive, which allowed Eddie to hurt him back, and it led to that whole situation where he was up against the cage, and he and the illegal knee came from there. And this fight, I kind of thought was going to go in a similar fashion. I thought that Poirier was going to hurt Alvarez, but I was concerned about what happened, what would happen after that part, because we've seen Alvarez. He's like, I mean, he's like, I hate to use the typical analogy of a caged animal, but when you get Alvarez hurt, somehow I'm trying to think of a comic book character. He's like Wolverine or something like that. He just comes back harder and harder and harder. He just comes back harder and harder. And in this situation, in this fight here, Alvarez looked good at the start. Um, but when Poirier hurt him in the second round, you saw Poirier use a controlled aggression, a controlled, diverse striking uh, showcase at the end there to just overwhelm Alvarez. You knew it was over the minute he grabs that clinch and he lands those two knees to Alvarez's head. And at that point in time, the former Bellator champion is just basically like a sitting duck. And you see him try to stay on his feet as Poirier is just basically pot shotting him, landing shot after shot until he goes down. And it's finished by Mark Goddard. There's people who are, I mean, it's interesting seeing the response to Mark Goddard's stand up, because Alvarez had Poirier pushed up against the cage, and he threw a 12-6 elbow on Poirier's shoulder. Mark Goddard stopped the fight, stood them up, warned Alvarez at that point, which is all the right things to do, because remember, 12-6 elbows are illegal. Period. Big period at the end of that statement. 12-6, our elbows are illegal. It can land on the tip of your pinky, it can land on your knee, it can land anywhere. If you're down and your opponent is on top of you and they throw a 12-6 elbow, that is not allowed. It occurred here. Mark Henry is taking all the blame for this. If you listen to him on Ariel's show on Monday, he took all the blame for this, saying that he was trying to tell Eddie to throw an elbow, but his motion to get Eddie's attention was a 12-6 motion, and Eddie, being in the fight in the moment, threw a 12-6 elbow and got himself put out of that position. So it's just an unfortunate circumstance from a series of events that led to that situation there. I don't believe Eddie is a dirty fighter in any way, shape, or form, but it's just an unfortunate situation that led to him being stood up, taken out of position, and eventually finished for Poirier. For both men, this is a very important fight here. Poirier has basically said that he believes he should fight next for the title. We all know that that's not going to happen. Conor McGregor is already talking about a potential fight in Vegas towards the end of this year. We know it's going to be against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov's talking about he wants at least 2 million, at least what Nate Diaz made when he fought Conor. I think Nate made 2.2 million or something like that. The UFC would be idiotic not to give him that money. They need to back up the Brinks truck, take it over to Russia, and give him whatever is needed to get him into the cage, because that's legit the last big fight they have to make. And I'm even talking about Cormier and Brock Lesnar and Cormier Jones 3. This is the last big fight that they have right now, Conor versus Khabib, because this is the fight that the MMA world, that the fight game needs right now. Unfortunately, that means Poirier has to be stepped over. So the question now becomes, if you're Poirier, do you wait? Because let's say this fight occurs in 2018, we get Khabib and we get Conor McGregor fighting in 2018. Well, if Conor wins, we have no idea. It's been 2 years since he stepped in to the octagon, so we know it's not going to be anytime soon for him to get back in there and fight, especially if he gets a big payday. With Habib, you don't know what injuries are going to look like for him. You don't know what his schedule may be like for returning to the cage. So I personally do not think that Poirier is going to sit on the shelf that whole time. I think the answer is Tony Ferguson, because remember, Ferguson was in the title picture. Injuries kept him out of it, and we don't know what's going to happen when he returns. I've seen some of his videos of him training, playing around on Instagram, and it looks like his movement is back, but we just don't know what he's going to look like at that time. So I do believe a fight against Poirier could happen, and that will be important for both men because it gives them an opportunity to solidify themselves as the number one contender, with Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting sometime this year. If the UFC was smart, they should try to book this fight on that same card. Pay these, and it has value as a main event on like a UFC on Fox event, but we've seen that UFC on Fox isn't generating the numbers that it once were. This isn't a opportunity for them to just throw an important fight, some big names on a Fox show and expect the ratings to pour in. This isn't 2015. This isn't 2014. So with that in mind, I think proper booking would be to put Poirier and Ferguson on a fight card with Khabib and Conor later on this year. If it's November, great. If it's December, even better. Get all these men on the same card. That way, if someone gets hurt, you have two guys to select from who are preparing for a fight to get them in there. All four of these men, any combination of the four, is a big fight that people will want to see, a big fight that can be promoted. So get these men all on the same card, and let's get this to happen. On the other hand, we have Alvarez, and Alvarez took a calculated risk in betting on himself because that was his last fight in his contract, and now he is without a fight contract, and he's out there hanging in the wind. So it's interesting to me what will happen next, because let's see how old Eddie is. Eddie's also turning. He's 34. He'll be 35 in January. He's in I would say, the latter stages of his career. This man has been in some wars. 29-6. He's been fighting since 2003, so 15 years at least in this fight game. And he's fought. I mean, this dude's fought some of the best of the best. I mean, Shinya Aoki. He fought Nick Thompson all the way back then. He's fought Joaquin Hansen, Toby Yamada. I can't believe I just said that. Roger Huerta, Pat Curran. We remember those fights he had against Michael Chandler, Raphael and Schwan, Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez. I mean, he is the underground king. And some people are talking about him going back to Bellator and just running the circuit there again, doing the rubber match against Michael Chandler. I would love to watch that fight. I would do that all day, every day. Michael Chandler's about to be a free agent too, so that means that they have to work extra hard to lock him down as well. But if you told me right now that Bellator booked a fight card with Chandler and Alvarez as the main event, damn it, I'm watching. Like, that's the type of fight right there that I want to see in their card, because I think that those two guys will kind of still tear it up once again. But even still, I think that Alvarez, even if he doesn't come back to the UFC, from a financial standpoint, I think that he does have some value that will kick off that will work with some organization. He can go over to Ryzen. I mean, he has a big following in Japan. You know, that's kind of where he got some of his big fights. He fought Kikuno over there in Dream. He fought Kawajiri over there in Dream. Like so, like there's been some great fights he's had over there in Japan. So he can go back over there and fight for Ryzen as well. He has options. He doesn't have to come back to the UFC for a lighter excuse me he doesn't have to come back to the UFC for a lesser payday. We know that coming off of a loss out of your last contracted fight, it doesn't put you in the best position to negotiate with that organization. So there's definitely that, and we'll see what that kind of looks like for him. But I don't think he comes back to UFC. I think he goes. I would not be surprised if he goes back to Bellator and reaches out and takes the most money that is available to him. So that's what I think is next for both of those fighters. Then let's talk about Jose Aldo and Jeremy Stephens. Aldo finishing Stephens with a nasty body shot in the first round to get his win back and get his mojo back. To be honest, the elation he shown on his face when he won that fight was hard to not get emotional seeing that. The man has been through some shit. Like Aldo's been through some shit. I believe he's the greatest featherweight of all time. He cleaned out that featherweight division until he ran into Conor McGregor. Yes, he's had the 2 losses to Max Holloway since, but Aldo, I mean, this guy has done things in this sport that were impressive, for lack of a better term. Do not let Conor McGregor's defeat of him in 2015 give you a revisionist history of Jose Aldo's career. This is the man that wrecked Chad Mendes twice, defeated Frankie Edgar twice, wrecked Ricardo Lamas, blew up Kenny Florian. He had a bad 5th round against Mark Hominick, but he still won that. This is the man who wrecked Uriah Faber, wrecked Mike Brown, Manny Gambarian. I mean, when he defeated Cub Swanson with that double knee in how many seconds was that? 8 seconds? I'll never forget that highlight reel. This guy has done it all, and I mean, he deserves your respect as the greatest featherweight champion of all time. Conor McGregor never defended that title that he won, so that's not even a conversation. Yes, Conor stopped him in 13 seconds, and that was the beginning of his downfall. That was the beginning of removing him as a relevant, not even relevant name, but as like the biggest draw that he was. It just did all that for him, but seeing him get this win over Stephens and that relief that came over him was important. It was a hell of a moment. He's only 31 years old. He's still young, but we know that he's been through a lot when it comes to the fight game. He was hurt. Stephens had him hurt at one point in time. But man, that body shot was just sickening, and it you rarely see Stephens on the side of that type of finish. Let me see, how many times has Stephens been finished in his career? I mean, he's only been KO twice, and this is a man that has 43 professional fights. He's only been stopped via knockout twice. He's only been stopped actually 5 times, 2 by knockout, 3 by submission. The other knockout came to Yves Edwards back at UFC on Fox 5 6 years ago. So yeah, like there's really no, you can't take anything away from Jeremy Stephens. He hasn't been stopped. That was his first time being stopped since. So I mean, that, you know how big of a moment that was for Aldo there. So I just definitely wanted to tip my hat off to that and kind of point that out, because that was huge. Then we had Joanna Jędrzejczyk defeating Tisha Torres via unanimous decision. And I'm upset that Schwan couldn't be on the show to talk about this because he had Torres winning this fight. He definitely pointed to her as being a good matchup for Joanna, no longer champion. And you saw Joanna be able to. Tisha had some good moments, but she couldn't sustain anything against Joanna. And you see her kind of get herself back into the winning column now. Again, I still don't think she's anywhere. She's nowhere closer to the title picture than Jose Aldo, because she's also lost twice to the current champion. And people are saying that they're sick of her saying that she's the queen of the strawweight division, even though she's lost to Rose twice. The second fight against Rose was a lot closer than people think. I mean, she could have easily won the fight if she would have won that fifth round there. I had her, I think I had it 2-2 going into the fifth. That was a very close fight there in every way, shape, or form. Does she fight Rose again in the future? I don't think it's anywhere near anytime soon. And this strawweight division is not this strawweight division is not all. It's not a. I'm trying to think of the word to use. It's a deep group. I mean, you have Jessica Andrade, who I think is a number one contender. Claudia Gadelha, another name that could easily be champion. Carolina Kowalskiewicz, she could be champion. Carla Esparza is a former champion. She's ranked at 5th. I mean, this group is definitely dangerous. And we're going to see what it looks like in the next few months. I'm definitely very intrigued in this division. I think it's one of the more deep divisions in the UFC, regardless of what people say about it. And these women continuously go out there and put on great fights. And this was another example of such, with Joanna Jędrzejczyk getting her hand raised. So let's see what else happened on UFC on Fox 30, because I don't remember too much else of the card. Yeah, nothing else really stood out to me, but I want to talk about the ratings that came in from this showcase here, because this, even though this joint had 3 great fights at the top of the card, this fight has more important fights than the pay-per-view that's going on this weekend. But this joint was the lowest rated UFC on Fox card in a 7-year deal that they've been working together. The lowest rated, I think it came in with 1.6 million viewers, and there was nothing else really going on from a sports standpoint on Saturday. This card should have been bigger than it was, for lack of a better term. Yeah, there's nothing to really even like. I don't even know how you really start when you talk about this. It is definitely points to oversaturation. Danny Segura on MMA Beat today was calling it the boy who calls wolf, because you have the UFC telling you every fight card, this is a great card. Every fight card, this is a great card. But we all know that every fight card is not a great card. We sat through UFC Hamburg, where all those fights went to decision, and you wanted to throw yourself out the window as they kept trying guys out there. We've sat through every fight card that's getting longer and longer. It seems like hopefully this ESPN deal is going to help with that. Supposedly it will. But we've sat through this, and people are, I guess, fed up is the right word to use. They're no longer sitting around and taking the UFC up on their offer to watch hours upon hour of mixed martial arts week in and week out. I mean, let's look at their schedule, their recent schedule for the UFC. Let's look at their recent schedule and see when's the last time they've taken an extended break. So this is what we have so far. We have this weekend's card on the 4th, and then the next fight will be, for UFC event, will be 2 weeks later on the 25th. Then there's 2 weeks between that and one on the 8th of September. Then the 8th, then there's 3 straight weeks, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd. It'll be interesting to see what those events look like. Then you have another 1 week break, a 2 week break, actually, 2 week break. before you have another event in October. You have 2 events in October through 4 in November. So that gives you, in November, you have a fight card every weekend. 5 in November. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a fight card every weekend in November, guys. That's funny. They do every Saturday and then the last Friday. So you literally have one UFC event for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight weeks. Actually, I'm wrong, folks. Look at this, is getting out of hand. In November, you have, in a 5-week time span, you have, oh man, look at this. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So like let's look at this, guys. From November 1st through December, so from November 3rd through December 29th, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 8 weeks. Okay, that's 8 weeks right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks technically. 9 weekends there. You have a fight card on November 3rd, 10th, 17th, 24th, 30th, December 1st, December 8th, December 15th, and December 29th. That's the last 9 weeks of the year. There's only one weekend that doesn't have a UFC event. That's going to be bonkers. And this is the type of shit that comes back to you and makes you realize that, hey, the UFC is struggling to get these shows adequately promoted and adequately spaced out to get people to sit down and watch this stuff. I'm not like, no one's going to sit down and watch all of it. They have fight cards in Milwaukee, China, the UFC Fight Night. There's just so much shit going on that no one's going to sit down and watch all of that. So when you see a great fight event, like UFC on Fox 30 go down and have such bad ratings, you can only attribute that to oversaturation, lack of proper spacing and promotion, and lack of star power. If Conor McGregor was on the card, yes, it would have done millions upon millions of views. We know that. Ronda Rousey, we know that. Brock Lesnar, we know that. But they can't put those guys on these free events. So it's going to create situations like this where the ratings just aren't going to be there. Hopefully moving them over to ESPN will help, and it will help when it comes to promotion and giving them access to more sports fans than those that are on the Fox platform. But it's not alarming. It's a trend we've been seeing for the last 2 years, but it's still kind of perplexing when we see it. So that's all I wanted to say about UFC on Fox 30 and UFC 227 this weekend. As always, you can follow me at rgarcia_sports, where I'm talking professional wrestling, MMA, football, just about everything in between, social justice in sports. I'm definitely talking about that a lot as well. So if you don't like that, hey, go fuck yourself. Because it needs to be. We need to talk about that in the intersection between sports and society. Is coming up more and more. It's coming up more and more. I'm just going to say that. At MMA Ratings Net is where you can find us on Instagram and Twitter. Follow us on Twitter because that's where we post a lot of our work from myself, Schwan Humes, Anna Martin, and Michael Ford. And as always, again, go to MMAratings.net where you can rate the fights. You can tell us what you're looking forward to each weekend when fights are announced. Tell us how you're looking forward to the fights, and after the fights are over, tell us what you thought. We always want to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, thank you guys for listening to this edition of the show. Please feel free to like and subscribe to our content, and have a great week. We will be back next Thursday. Schwan and I will be here to talk all things MMA. Have a great weekend, everybody.